After interviewing Paul Apodaca and going back and looking at the diagram and the explanation of what he gave me, of who he talked to at the scene, what he saw was in direct opposition to the scene information that was presented on the Albuquerque Police Department reports. And as I began to review the reports, I saw a conflict of information between what the first officer, Detective Merriman, saw, the immediate next officer responding, that was Officer Wallace, and what Paul Apodaca said. Officer Merriman came across the scene by accident on his way into headquarters. He said what he saw were cars and people, and he noticed a red car was up against the pole. He asked radio if an accident had been reported, and the Albuquerque police radio said none had been reported. Officer Merriman made a U-turn and went back to the scene, and that's when he found the man standing next to this red car up against the pole. Albuquerque Police Department radio dispatched an officer to the scene of an accident without injuries. That officer, Officer Wallace, arrived on scene within 40 seconds of being dispatched. Later, she said that she had been in the area. Her account of what she saw at the scene varies from what Mr. Apodaca told me. Mr. Apodaca told me that he saw no uniformed patrol officer, no female officer. Officer Wallace was, in fact, a female officer. He only talked to the plainclothes officer. The conflicts in the story, the conflicts in the accounts of what happened at the scene that Detective Merriman gives, that Officer Wallace gives, and Mr. Apodaca gives, complements, in a way, the other confusing information that is in the police reports. There is not one piece of information in those first reports at the scene that mesh. And it made it very difficult to even try to begin to come up with an investigative conclusion. What we did was took the first 10 reports of the people who responded to the scene, Detective Merriman, Officer Wallace, the Albuquerque ambulance, the fire rescue, criminalistics, and then the supporting units that came along to try to look at where we could resolve these inconsistencies. For some time, the scene was considered just an accident scene, and it wasn't until rescue arrived that a bullet hole was found on the side of the victim's car. And then they recognized that the victim had 2 wounds in her head. Police were still considering the crime, the scene, as an accident. So for 20-25 minutes, that scene was unprotected, and the information is not documented as it would have been necessarily if it was a crime scene.